So now we're going to switch to the Bristol Research and Publications Project. We set this up about 2 years ago as part of the CPD of our teaching staff. The idea was to give people the possibility to start doing practitioner research in a more structured way alongside their teaching role. They are given time within what we call individual and centre development time, which gives them the possibility to do work on materials development, assessment design, things like that. But also, if staff would like to also move towards publication, then they have some time set aside for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way we position this and the way we think about it, and then I'll move towards the end towards some of the results of a piece of research that I've been doing with a colleague, Jeff Pocock, where we've been interviewing 6 of these people who've been through the process towards publication, nearly all of whom have published as part of the process. And I'll let you know what they say about the process. And we're currently preparing an article on this. So the first thing I wanted to say is, obviously, we see this as part of a deeper process, which is to do with the identity development and construction in people, and the fact that we recognise that the context people are working in is constantly changing. So people are in transition professionally, personally, but professionally as well. And so is the environment within which they work. So I'll drop a few quotes in here. I'll probably skim over them quite quickly. But of course, the PPT will be available to you later with the references. So my first focus is, as I say, on identity and the way a process like this, a project like the Research and Publications Project, gives people the possibility to maybe reconsider their identity as a teacher and to include an identity as a practitioner researcher within that teaching identity, or maybe to extend beyond their teaching identity in other ways. So we have given people the opportunity to do this, and as Ivanic has said, this is part of a process whereby they also affiliate themselves with others. So I have my nice Everything Happens Today picture there on the right to give you an idea of a way that people are working in quite complex environments that you'll all be familiar with. And at times you're very much an individual in that process, perhaps quite isolated from others. And at other times you're able to connect your experience with other people. And you do that through practices, but it needs to be shaped in some way, structured. So that was the idea of the Research and Publications Project, was to provide a structure within which we could address this more explicitly. So I'm not saying people didn't do research before. I'm saying that we created more of a structure around it, but a structure which was suitably flexible to allow people to do this in their own way. And one of the original thoughts was, should we be preparing a book? And I think one of the things that would work against that would be that the individuals are very much on their own CPD pathways. So it would be quite complex in our setting to get everybody to produce a piece of research at the same time and write it up at the same time to the same deadline and so on. So I think I would have gone even grayer than I am if we had approached it that way. Now, when we look at the way our professional identities develop through a process like this, I think there's 2 things. I mean, it's things we recognise perhaps in our children or in our plants in our garden, but there's 2 things going on at the same time. On the one hand, our professional identities are growing out of the work we do, and on the other hand, our professional identities and the work we do inform and shape the work. So there's 2 processes which go on at the same time. As we grow, we inform and shape, and as we are informed and shaped, it contributes to our professional growth. So I think both these processes have gone on. Now, I like to ground what we're doing in something. And for me, I'm reaching out to Communities of Practice, which is the Wenger 1998 book. And I think we do this in a very heuristic way, but I think it's very useful for us to think about what a community really is. And we really think about communities of practice as practice from the point of view of doing something together. And the argument is we wouldn't have a community of practice without the practice. So Wenger's described various aspects of that. And the diagram here shows the combination of joint enterprise, doing things, mutual engagement, doing things together, and shared repertoire, the things that we value when we do these things. And these are the things which bind people together and give people a sense of community, rather than simply talking about community as we sometimes see in policy documents, for instance. So just to start with mutual engagement, the point that Wenger's making here is it's not just about us, it's about the people we work with. So I really like this quote because it talks about not just our competence, but the competence of our colleagues or the competence of our students if we're partnering with students. It's not just what we know, but it's what we don't do and what we don't know, because we can derive that from others. So that makes it into a collaborative process. Shared repertoire, that's something that I'm really working with our colleagues on, thinking about what are our routines, are the words we value, the tools we use, gestures, symbols. So I've got my time thing there on the right-hand side, and I already mentioned, you know, are we all going to go for the same deadline, or are we working at our own pace, but we still value deadlines, you know, so the clock is ticking usually in one way or another, and that's part of what we do. But there are so many other things which we share in our context, and some of those things, you know, would be common to all contexts, and other things would be particularly Bristol, and other things would be particularly our centre. So we're trying to make those kind of things explicit so that people understand the value they have for each other. And what we do then is we build this community, and you can see here a couple of the quotes coming out of my research with Jeff Pocock, which I mentioned earlier. So we have the sense of community growing, teachers saying we can learn from each other. I can pass on the knowledge. It's not just my knowledge, it's knowledge that will be valuable to others. I'm able to talk about it. I'm learning to talk about what I've learned, creating a vocabulary by which I can share these ideas, and beginning to feel a bit more part of the community. And these were comments that we got in original interviews when we started this process about 18 months ago. And Jeff has re-interviewed the same people in January this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we can pull the experience of 18 months ago with the experience now, given that, you know, many of these people have now published work in the meantime, and they've sort of moved on also into new positions sometimes, you know, not as a direct result of this, but I'm sure it plays a role. So, for instance, Maggie Boswell was published in Language Scholar. We've had a lot of conversations with Jean Godfrey and colleagues at Leeds who've been very helpful in providing a route for some of these publications. Another theme that we've experienced is doubt and positivity and newness. So this is new to people. People were saying, oh dear, maybe I shouldn't have done this at all. Maybe I should have stayed in my comfort zone. It's new to me. I'm having a go, but I'm a novice. And gradually they were moving towards a feeling of being more comfortable, accepting that they might be a novice in terms of doing research, but they're not a novice in terms of doing teaching and other aspects of our profession. So they're understanding themselves as both a teacher, a practitioner, and also as a researcher, and putting those things together with the advantage that they have a great deal of experience and expertise, which feeds into their research, and very quickly they can become not a novice anymore. So we're also thinking about the journey that people are on, and as I said, they're all on separate journeys, but the separate journeys are are joined together in very interesting ways. So there was a lot of collaboration going on during the project. Some people wrote together, some people wrote separately, but researched together, and other people have been researching recently with students. So partnering with students, I think, is a very important theme in the way we're moving the process forward. So it is a process. It's been quite organic. People have noticed that even though there's a lot of planning involved in the process, data collection, analysis, it's still an organic process because you're still in an organization, you're researching a real situation, lots of unexpected things come up. People have a platform within this project to discuss those unexpected things. Getting access to data is always a bit tricky, isn't it, when you're actually involved in teaching within the same situation. People gradually began to feel more like an insider in terms of being allowed to do research. You know, it's okay, you can do research. You know, you don't have to call yourself a researcher with a capital R in order to be able to do meaningful work which will be valuable to the wider community and share through publications. Somebody said, I've got something to show now to show for the work, which is great. So one of the stepping stones we used was our blog at CALD, which I've put the link in this slide. This is an example of Deb Catavello, who recently published she published in January on grammaring on our CALD blog site. So often it was a process where people would, first of all, publish on the blog as a kind of practice exercise, a stretching exercise, and then they would move that on, and then they would maybe present at a conference on the same theme, or they would publish on the same theme in a more formal way. So I think what we're talking about here is roughly what Wenger later talks about in 2020, Wenger trainer and Wenger trainer, both authors. They talk about creating something of value. Generating value, I think, is what we're achieving through this process. And that value can have all kinds of different outings, from a vibe to a publication. What we've seen is, as my colleagues Kathy and Fiona have written about, the need to have a structure for this. It needs to have a place, and there needs to be time available for it. So every organization, every context will have a different way in creating that place and providing that time, and recognizing at the same time what we've said in our chapter here, that these are complex and unpredictable endeavors, and you have to work with that. You have to be ready to deal with that uncertainty, and you have to help people to be ready to deal with that uncertainty. Okay, so I think I've just managed to stay within my 10 minutes, more or less, and I'll hand back now. But thank you for listening to me.